Welcome to From Our Perspective. I'm joined by partner John Topolewski to discuss a $1.5 million personal injury settlement. Our client suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident, and John fought the insurance company to recover our client's rightful benefits. Thanks so much for joining me today, John. Tell me more about our client and the car accident that led to his injuries.
It was a pretty tragic situation. It was the day after Christmas. He was driving home one evening and another vehicle failed to stop at a stop sign and struck him, T-boned at full speed. The impact was so significant it caused his vehicle to spin and roll over at least 2 times. He ended up right side up, but on the embankment next to the roadway. Obviously, his body was significantly jostled. In the flipping and spinning, he was able to extricate himself. He was seatbelted, but he was pretty significantly injured. He had what was diagnosed as a subdermal hemorrhage, which is the space between the brain and the skull, so a brain bleed. He also had a significant neck injury.
And in this accident, the other driver was at fault. What was their policy coverage?
Yeah, so that was a big issue in this case. Most insurance policies have an underlying liability coverage that you have. That can be anything from, in Colorado, $25,000 up to $500,000, millions of dollars. And that's usually easy to determine for the insurance company. Where it can become a bit cloudy for them is what's called an umbrella policy. So an umbrella policy is something that is just that. It's an umbrella over all of your liability coverages. In this particular case, the at-fault party had a $500,000 liability policy, but later we discovered a $1 million umbrella policy. So fortunately for our client, there was $1.5 million in insurance coverage available.
And you kind of touched on it there, but were there any challenges you encountered in negotiating the settlement, and what was the total amount of compensation?
Yeah, so that was a challenge because throughout the course of this case, we've been talking with the insurance company, as we do in every case, making sure that they were aware of the severity of the injury so that they could properly set their reserves and not be surprised when they've got a very big claim presented to them. And throughout this time, they had represented that there was a $500,000 policy. Knowing that in this case wouldn't be enough coverage for our client, we advised the carrier, look, we could try to settle this case for $500,000, which you've disclosed is your policy limit, but we're going to need verification that there is nothing more. And that all of a sudden set off, I think, internally within Allstate, some alarm bells that, okay, let's get the paperwork to demonstrate that there's no more insurance. In doing so, they found this other policy. So had we not been persistent in that, it's possible that this person handling this on their own or through another firm may have left $1 million on the table.
And you will be pursuing another case against a carrier. Tell me a little bit more about that and why you feel that this is necessary as well.
It's a bit technical, but the legislature in Colorado has recognized the importance of making sure that people who are injured understand the amount of insurance that's available to them. So there's a statute that says an insurance company must disclose all of the insurance coverages that are available upon receipt of a written request by a claimant. So in this case, our client or us on behalf of the client. And if they don't do so, they can be penalized. And there's a penalty of $100 a day until they properly disclose the amount. So we submitted a request pursuant to this statute, received a response to that request, which inaccurately only listed a $500,000 policy. And then a year later, they presented this. So we're going to be seeking, on top of the $1.5 million we recovered for our client, an additional $100 per day penalty pursuant to the statute.
And if someone is in a similar situation, in a car accident, they think they may have suffered a traumatic brain injury, what are some important steps that they take?
So making sure that you get the proper testing done, get immediate treatment done so you can start to develop a baseline to see where you're at. In our client's case, there was a frank diagnosis of a brain bleed. But oftentimes you see in concussions, there's no way to really diagnose that. A CT scan, an MRI, they typically don't show concussions. You can consider a concussion like a bruise on the brain. And the way that I talk to people about it, not as a doctor, but just as somebody who looks at these, is, that creates a muddiness in your brain in terms of sending signals. So as soon as a signal where you normally have, oh, I have to pick this up, or oh, I have to put this down, that signal in a normal brain is easy. But in somebody who's had a brain injury, it gets a little muddy, and you may not be able to get to that point as fast. That can lead to frustration, obviously, confusion on the part of these individuals. And so oftentimes it's not the person who has the injury who is able to really understand and appreciate the effects. It's the people around them, spouses, children, friends. So when I'm talking to a client, that's usually one of the things that I talk about if there's suspicion of a traumatic brain injury is, what are your friends saying? What are your spouse saying? How do they think you're doing? And if there is a problem there, that's typically, there are things you can do. There's doctors called neurologists or neuropsychologists who specialize in treating and diagnosing these types of injuries. So getting a diagnosis is important because then you can start working to correcting the problem.
Thank you so much for your perspective, John. And if you were injured in a car accident and facing a similar situation, you can reach out to us to schedule a free case assessment on our website or give us a call.